Thank you, everybody, for joining us for Janome Club, brought to you by Janome Australia. Today, we are going to be looking at the cover stitch machine. So the cover stitch machine is what we would call a professional finishing machine. So it is used to finish off garments or seams. You can also use it in some instances to do a decorative type of stitch over your work, but it is predominantly a finishing machine to finish the edges. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through actually threading the machine, how you swap over from for the different stitch settings that you can do. And also we will be looking at one of the cover hem guides. There are two different ones available. We'll be looking at one that we have that is my favorite. So we might go over to this camera here and I'll show you a little bit about what cover hem is compared to what overlocking is, because they do look very similar, and also a bit about the guide. So I just might move my little guide just off to the side for now. So on here, I'm not 100% sure. Melissa can come in. We can see this double row of stitching here. I think we should be able to, yeah. So this double row of stitching on top, so this is called a cover hem with a 2-thread wide. So you can do a cover hem on some models. So our machine does 3 needles. So you can do either all 3 needles, which means you would have 3 rows of stitching on the front, or you can do 2-thread narrow or wide. So this is like my folded edge, which may be your hem or something like that. And then if I flip it over to the underside, you can then see the stitches. So this looks very similar to an overlocker underneath on the inside, but on the outside you can you normally will have a number of row of threads. If you have a look at any of your commercially made t-shirts, blouses, tracksuit pants, lots of those sorts of items will be finished with a cover stitch machine. So I'm just going to bring in another little sample here, which is made with an overlocker, just to sort of show you the difference. So I'll just set this here and then let Melissa organise the camera. Sure. So these seams here have been joined with an overlocker. So the stitches look very similar, but they're actually utilized to either neaten off the edges or to construct a garment together. So quite often you'll see that a overlocker and a cover stitch machine are utilized together in the same garment. T-shirts are probably the biggest one. So if you grab out a t-shirt that you've purchased from somewhere, if you have a look at the actual seams, like the side seams and the underarm seam, they will generally be overlocked. But then if you have a look at the hem, either the hem on the bottom of the garment or on the sleeves, quite often then that will be with the cover stitch machine. So that's just a little bit of a difference between an overlocker to a cover stitch machine. So with our CoverPro 3000, CP3000, you can also do a decorative style stitch, which is called a top cover hem. So that is where you thread up with a 5th spool of thread, and you create, I'll bring in another little example here. This is with our 3 threads. So you can actually see there's a 3 threads on this one here, and then the pink is our top cover hem. So these have got the cover stitch stitching underneath, so it always looks like a little sort of S's or figure 8s, and then has the top cover on that as well. So that's just another option that you can do with the CP3000. The project that would have come out last month is for this apron, which has some decorative top cover hemming on it. And then the pocket is put on with the cover stitch machine, and also the hem, the actual hem of the and side seams of the apron are then done on the cover stitch machine as well. So let me bring my little guide back in. So with a cover stitch machine, you generally would fold under your hem. So if I've got, say, just some fabric here, you would then fold up whatever your hem width would be. And then you need to stitch with the hem on the bottom. So sometimes it's hard then to tell, especially with some fabrics, you can't press a nice seam on them, especially when you're working with stretchy sort of t-shirt fabrics. You generally can't get a really nice crisp hem the same you would with cotton fabrics. So with this little cover hemming guide that we've got, what it does is you actually set the width of the guide to how deep you want your seam allowance to be, and then it holds your fabric folded underneath there to get perfect stitching. The little attachment screws that you get actually are a standard accessory as part of the machine. So when you buy the guide, you just get the actual guide, and the little screws come with the machine. Like all our blister packs, as per normal, we do have instructions for mounting it on your machine and how to set it up on the back of the blister packing card. So let's go over to our machine, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to thread our machine. So it's very easy to thread the CoverPro machine. This is our CP3000 that I've said before. We would turn our hand wheel until there's a little check mark on our hand wheel, and we line that up with the front. And the other thing we look for is these three little thread guides sort of in the middle bottom of our machine under the door. They're lined up. So that way we know that it's set up for threading the bottom looper. The other thing is that there is a little handle here that we just pull that. Melissa's about to sneeze. Bless you, Melissa. There's a little handle here, and this is very similar to our 644D overlocker, where you flick a little switch and the bottom looper comes out. So I would just pull that switch out, and my bottom, do we still call it a looper? Yeah, bottom looper. That just flicks out, so it makes it for really easy threading. So I then would take my thread. We're going to go under our guide, and this is very similar tension discs set up to all of our lay-in tension overlockers as well. They generally have a little thread guide, and then they go through the tension discs. We then have another thread guide here, and this is probably the trickiest part of this overlocker, and we might zoom in here a little bit. So I've got my three little guides here lined up. So this is literally as tricky as it gets, is that I thread my thread through those three guides together. Then we go around the back. There's a little hook at the bottom of this looper. We go behind there. Then there's a little eyelet at the top. So there is a threading diagram in the machine, plus in the instruction book it will show you for threading up. So so I've gone through my three thread guides here, around the hook, through the eye of the looper, and then through the second eye of the looper. And that is our bottom looper threaded. So I can then click this back up into place. To thread my top needles, they're all very similar under our thread guide. And we just add a little bit, zoom out a little bit there. Yep, perfect. So we run our needle threads. They come down through the tension disc and straight across the machine up over the thread guide here. Then we've got two thread guides that we go behind. Sorry, three. Too many different thread guides here. So the CP3000 also has a multi-needle threader. So we have a little lever here that has got a left, a middle, and a right. So I just would flick that over to whichever needle I am threading. So I'm doing the right. We would then come down into position. Then this one, we loop past this little thread guide and straight across and hold the thread. I don't know how well you can see that. Yep. So my thread's going straight across here. Once we've got that in position, it's just a matter of clipping this up, and our thread has been pulled through to the back of the needle. Got one threaded. the other two needles thread in exactly the same way, that we just go straight across, up over the thread guide, through the 3 thread guides. I then move my little lever into my middle needle position, put my threader down, go straight across, make sure you don't drop your thread, and up. Didn't hold that one in the right spot. It's always when you're doing everything on camera that
try and rush a little bit.
just try and rush. You know, you might be a little bit nervous. You've done it a million times before.
Exactly.
So we're going to do our 3rd needle here. And again, we go through our 3 guides. This one goes through on the left. I move my needle threader over, pick it down. And you'll notice, similar to with an overlocker, I'm threading my needle threads all the way. So you don't want to thread them down, all 3 threads down to almost through the needle, and then try and thread them through the needle, because inevitably you will get them twisted. So with our overlockers and our cover stitch machines, I take 1 thread all the way through and through the eye of the needle, and then I do the 2nd or 3rd thread, because that way I am not going to get my threads all twisted. So there we are, all threaded up for our standard cover hem. I can then close up our door, just make sure that thread's staying in there, and we're ready to go. I am then going to take my fabric, and if I just lay my fabric, so I don't have the guide or anything on here for now, I'm just going to lay my fabric under. We're going to turn our machine on. And you can start to sew. So this is doing a 3-thread cover hem. Once I've stitched it a bit, I'm just going to unloop my threads. Very long thread tails there. My foot back down. So you can see here, I'm just having to eyeball that seam as we go through. Now, when we come to the edge of a seam, the easiest way to loosen up those threads to pull a work out is we wheel our hand wheel up to move our needles into the upper position. I then raise up my foot. I then take my tweezers and I pull it under the foot, and I grab my threads and I pull them out towards me. Once I've then got those threads, I then can cut that off, and then you give this a firm pull at the back. And what that does is that actually pulls all the threads to the back to lock them off. So there you can see that is a triple top cover hem. And if I turn it over, I may or may not, oh, I didn't do too bad. You can see there how I've gone off because I didn't have any guide showing me where to hold my fabric. So that's where this handy dandy guide comes in. So this one, there's a couple of different screw holes on the front of your machine. This one we put into our left-hand side. Screw that into position. Now, if I needed to change my threads or anything, once this is attached, you can open and close the door with no problem. So I could change my threads and all of that. So then we would set this up. We have 2 screws on here on the front. The one on the bottom is almost like the width of our actual seam allowance that we want to turn up, whereas the one on the top actually moves everything left and right to where the needle is. So I'm going to set that up there. Then I would take my fabric and fold up my seam allowance. And the folded part, I'm trying to explain what it is. So you can sort of see there's my seam allowance. This folded part of my seam allowance will go into that little, is that a better camera? I don't know.
I'll flick over for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can see kind
Yeah.
of a little bit of.
So I've got this is my raw edge of my hem is up against the guide, and then my fabric would fold down there, put it under our foot. Now there's another little guide that sits on top that you just sort of slide over, and that just holds everything in place. So I can sort of flip this up to show you that there's my raw edge of my fabric, and then you just need to make sure that goes under that guide there. I've tried with the project, the apron, to give you photos. I've sort of held the fabric back and taken photos of where everything sits. So hopefully if you have a look at the project, you'll be able to see exactly where everything gets set. And you can always lift this up and do a little double check. We go. Now, similar to some of our overlockers, on the cover stitch machine, you can also adjust the differential feed, which allows, especially for some of our multi-stretch wear or high stretch pieces, if you are getting any drag or pull from your fabrics, that you can adjust your differential to get a beautiful flat sort of finish. So that's not too bad. I've pretty much stayed on my seam all the way down there. So there you go. So that's the little thread guide. Now, to change this over to our top cover hem, that is also really easy. The top cover hem is actually all built in underneath this system. Sort of in the C frame of the machine. So it is just a matter of me pulling down on a lever behind, and that clips down my top cover hem contraption. I don't really know even what it's called. A top looper almost. It looks a bit like a looper of the bottom of your overlocker. So it has a piece that will swing in and out as we sew. You can sort of see that piece swinging there. And that will create that sort of decorative look on the top. So to thread this one, is we start off the same just through our normal tension discs. Then we have a number of little guides here, and it is literally almost like you're going over, under, over, under. It's sort of, I call this the fun threading because you go over a guide, under a guide, over a guide, under a guide, over a guide, under a guide, and then around the last guide. So there's no little holes that you have to try and poke it through. It is literally just lays in this little path and goes down. And the main thing you have to make sure, I don't know if you can see it on that camera, that there's the top looper part, I'll call it. The thread has to sit in this little groove here, like it's sort of got like a V, and you need to make sure that thread sits in there, because that's the bit that's going to catch the thread as we stitch to create that top cover hem. So now if I fold over another piece of fabric.
I'll start out on this one, then I'll put this.
Yep. So we're going to put our foot down. So you should be able to then see, if I start sewing, this little arm here will flick away and back in, and it is grabbing that fifth thread. I just stop and pull my thread. Oops. Get out of the way. Just
Move up so it hits own way.
I'm just pulling my thread, my top thread out of the way. Hold on a sec, everybody. I have just unclipped the foot. It's been mucking around. Let's grab this out. Just going to chop my threads again. This foot just clips on and off, and I have unclipped it. I clipped the back of the foot, and I have unclipped it from the machine. So there's the foot. It's very easy. You do actually get 2 feet with this machine. It'll be perfect time for me to show you. You do, I don't know which camera we're on, this one. You do get 2 feet. You get your standard metal foot and your clear foot. This is very good for seeing, especially when you're stitching in the round, around, say, like the bottom of a t-shirt or something like that, because you can then line up your stitches you've already stitched up with the next row as you go around your item. So we might as well swap over our foot. Get all my threads out of the knot. And that just clips on the back. Let's try and get it into place. There's just a little clip on the back, similar to the shank on your sewing machine. Normal sewing machine foot. And it just clips on there and is in position. Let the guide go above. Okay, this metal guide, that goes this one here.
Actually
Above, yep. Okay, now we're in action again. Okay, I'm just going to put my little cover hem one back in. All my threads. Let's go back to our little sample fabric. So the top cover hem, you can also, because it's not having to go through a needle, like the eye of the needle, you can also put decorative thread, like a thicker sort of 12 weight thread underneath the through that top cover hem, and it makes a really nice finish. So on the apron, I have done a now you can actually chain off on our CoverPro the other one using the top cover hem, similar to an overlock. So there is our finish of our top cover hem. So if I grab out my thread, so you can see there our 2 sort of finishes. This is your standard 3-thread top cover hem,
Yeah.
and this one is your top cover hem. So you just remember that it's also got the top. So the back of them looks exactly the same. That's got the stitching on the back. It's just when you have the decorative one on the front. So this one, the apron one, I don't know where are we here?
This one back.
So the apron, I've actually put a heavier weight. It's not quite the thickness of an embroidery floss. I think it was about 100, like a 12 weight thread. I've put that as the white thread on here, and I've actually stitched in sort of like curvy lines to create this sort of like decorative look on the apron. So that's just something that you can do, which is not then a finishing technique. It is just more of a decorative sort of technique. We have tried our cover stitch machine. I've got a samples here of many, many different fabrics. We have stitched through, this is a lycra with a metallic like embossed print. We've got fabrics with sequins on them. We've got fake sort of snake skin. And we have managed, we've got fur, cotton, lycra. These, like, we have stitched this machine on so many different fabrics to try them all out for you. And if you are new to an overlocker or a CoverPro machine and you want to, you're not sure about which thread is which and you're setting your tensions and things like that, one of the things we suggest is you should be able to see on here. This one, we've threaded the machine up with the corresponding colors that match the tension discs. So we threaded this machine up with pink, blue, and yellow on the top, and then we actually put green on the bottom on the underside. So that way you can then actually see which thread may be the one that is causing an issue and might be out of tension. So that's a very good trick or handy tip that we use a lot here, is that we thread the machines with the different colors, because then that's very easy for us to identify, oh, my blue thread's looping, therefore I know I need to adjust my blue thread tension. So that's just something else that we do a lot with our overlockers, especially when we got this machine the first time, we wanted to have a little play with it and try out all the different settings. So that's what we did, is we put the different colors in so that you could then tell which thread you were using. So I hope that was a little bit of an instructions on you for those of you who may have a CoverPro, or you're thinking about doing that slightly more professional looking finish on garments, that a CoverPro machine is one of those machines that you can then invest in to get that professional looking finish. So thank you very much for joining us for Club today, and we hope to see you next month. Thank you.